Hello everyone, how are you doing? I hope that you are doing so very well. Today I am here to talk to you about the books that I read in August. Before we get started, let's talk about Kindness Challenge and hashtag read it all away as per usual. Last month's Kindness Challenge was to smile at people as much as you could, and I really tried to do that and tried to be pleasant with people. It's just a good thing to aim towards. This month I'm going to challenge you to do a random act of kindness for someone that you live with. I live with my mom. I could do a cleaning job for her that she didn't ask me to do. If you live with a roommate, maybe get them their favorite kind of candy or favorite drink and just bring it home randomly and be like, I got this for you, I love you. If you live with yourself, treat yourself. Do something kind for yourself. Have a day in, have a movie night with yourself, whatever. Let's do it. As for Read It All Away, it is taking me forever to finish it, so I'm just extending it through whenever you want to finish Alexander Hamilton, the biography. It's just gonna happen when it happens. Now let's get into the books. I read 10 books in the month of August, 4 of which were graphic novels, which hardcore count as books, but they definitely didn't take as long to read as the other books. I'm going to talk about the books in the worst to best order, so if you didn't know that that's how I did my wrap-ups before, now you know. First up, we've got a pretty popular book here on the booktubes that I didn't necessarily love, Rebel Spring by Morgan Rhodes. The next book on the list is actually Falling Kingdoms, also by Morgan Rhodes, so I'm just going to talk about these together since there's not really much to distinguish between the two books without being spoilery. I listened to both of these on audiobook and I don't think that I would have finished them if not for the audiobooks, because the audiobook narrator is really fantastic and does a really great job. I think this fantasy series is just not for me. I liked the first book. It wasn't super impressive to me, but I was like, yeah, I believe that it's gonna get better. And then I did not like the second book as much as the first book. It just kind of went downhill. Probably didn't help that I was reading A Torch Against the Night while I was listening to Rebel Spring, because A Torch Against the Night was fantastic. I will talk about that in a little bit. I've just read a lot of fantasy books and I've read a lot better fantasy, so I think that's probably why I just didn't like this as much. There were a ton of characters, so the viewpoint changed a lot, which I found interesting and good because I liked moving around that much, but I just didn't feel like I knew any of them enough to care. I like that the characters are flawed, I'm just not invested in them at all. It wouldn't hurt me to not know what happens to them. The world building, there's honestly just a lot of potential with this series, but not a lot of follow through with that. There's a lot of things that could be really great, but they aren't. Most of what I could say about these books is that they are intriguing, but it's not intriguing enough to keep me wanting to read. That being said, I totally get it. I totally understand why people love this series, why it is so well loved on the booktubes, but it was just not for me. I gave Fallen Kingdoms a 3 out of 5 stars and Rebel Spring a 2.5 out of 5 stars. Next up, we have got Harry Potter and the Cursed Child Parts 1 and 2, written by Jack Thorne. This was probably the most highly anticipated release of this year, I would even say. New Harry Potter gets people pumped, and I went into this book with extremely low expectations, and I ended up enjoying it. When I first finished it, I rated it a 4 out of 5 stars, but then like thinking back and going through my notes on it, I was like, nah, it's more like a 3. The main takeaway from this book is that Scorpius is the most precious cinnamon roll to ever exist. Scorpius Malfoy is bae, and while this book was a fun ride and I enjoyed it, there were a lot of problems. More proof that you can like something and still have issues with it and then talk about it like I did for an hour. It'll come eventually, I promise. I actually got this book from Scholastic, so thank you so much to Scholastic for sending me this. I was so thankful and so grateful to get this book from them, and I'm really excited for you guys to see my discussion on it because I feel like this is a book that begs to be discussed. There's so much in it that needs to be discussed. Like I said, I gave this a 3 out of 5 stars. Next up is I'll Give You the Sun by Jandy Nelson. I was buddy reading this with Amory from Books Beauty Amory, but it was just not her cup of tea, so she actually stopped and then I just like sped through the rest of it. And overall, I enjoyed this. I don't think I loved it and it was as life-changing as it was for other people, but I really did enjoy it. I really liked Noah exploring his sexuality and just like coming to terms with that and having that representation because Noah is gay. The writing was beautiful, also a little bit too much at times. I went between like, oh, this is really pretty and like, oh, this is a little bit too flowery for me. So it was like back and forth, but overall the story was just so beautiful and so heartwarming and so touching and emotional, and I cried a little bit. It's fine. The things I didn't really like about this book was the magical realism aspect. Most of the time, magical realism is very obvious. You can tell when it's happening. In this book, it was like, is this magical realism? Are they seeing things just in their head? I just don't know, and I still don't know after finishing this book. I also didn't really love the relationship that Jude mood had in this book. While it was very romantic on the surface, if you dug a little deeper, it just kind of made me uncomfortable. I don't really want to say why it made me uncomfortable because I feel like that's a huge spoiler. If you want to ask me down below why I have issues with that, you can, and I will do the enter spoiler and we'll talk about it. I gave this book a 4 out of 5 stars. Next up is Night Road by Kristen Hanna. I joined a book club in my town, which is super exciting, and this was the first book for book club and is not something that I would have picked up at all. It was good to get me out of my zone. Man, was this book freaking emotional. I cried a lot. This is about 3 different friends, and it starts off when they're a lot younger, I think when they're in middle school, and then it skips forward to when they're seniors in high school, and then something really tragic happens right before graduation, and the rest of the book is about them and their families trying to deal with that situation. This book was pretty predictable. I could kind of pick out what was gonna happen. The major plot twist, once we got into it, I was like, all right, this is what it's gonna be. But regardless, I still loved the characters. I loved watching their journeys. I was emotional through the whole thing because so many things happened and they broke my heart. I'm just really glad I read this book, and now I want to read all of Kristen Hanna's books because I feel like they're all going to be very emotional like that. You should read this book, get your heart broken, just prepare yourself for that. I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars. The next 4 on my list are all the different Saga volumes that I read. Saga Volume 1 got a 4 out of 5 stars from me. Volume 2 got a 5 out of 5 stars from me. Volume 4 got a 5 out of 5 stars from me. And Volume 3 got a 5 out of 5 stars from me, but was my favorite out of the 4. Saga is a graphic novel series that is written by Brian K. Vaughan, and the art is by Fiona Staples. I've heard a lot about Saga. It is popular. Everywhere you go, if you talk about graphic novels, you hear Saga, 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 Saga. And I don't really know what I expected going in, but I don't think it was this story. The first volume took me a bit to get into, which is the reason for the 4 out of 5 star rating, but once I was in, I was hooked hardcore. Especially in the later volumes, and especially in Volume 3, every chapter ends on like a cliffhanger, and I was reading it while I was like in between getting things done, and so I would stop per chapter and I was like, no, I need to know what happens. What is hip hop happening? For those of you that don't know, the basic plot of Saga is that there are these 2 armies from a planet and a moon that circles that planet that have been fighting forever. Their fight has gone through the entire galaxy, and 2 people from each army fall in love. The rest of the volumes just follow their journeys and their adventures trying to run away from these people trying to kill them and raising their daughter, and the story is told from the perspective of their daughter. I feel like this is the most interesting graphic novel that I've ever read. This story has been the most compelling by far. Every chapter, every page makes you want to keep reading, makes you want to know what's happening, makes you want to find out the fate of these characters because you are so invested in them. It's so good. Everyone was right. Saga is amazing. I also want to shout out Hoopla. Hoopla is my favorite. I read all 4 volumes on Hoopla. Hoopla is basically like Overdrive, but it's based on a credit system. So you connect it to your library card and they have like all of these things you can choose from, and you can use your credits on whatever you want to. I've listened to a lot of audiobooks on there. It's great. Saga is amazing. Everyone read it. And last but not least, we have a book that was released this month, and it is A Torch Against the Night by Saga here. Oh my freaking word. This book was so freaking good. Going into it at first, I was like, this is gonna become a 4-book series. Was it meant to be a 4-book series? I was a little worried because the plan was a duology, and I was like, is there gonna be enough? Rest assured there is. I liked An Ember in the Ashes, but I absolutely loved A Torch Against the Night. The characters are so compelling. The world building is so interesting. The plot moves so fast, and it just takes so many turns, and I'm just like, what's happening? A lot of things also come to play in this book that make it able to be a 4-book series. There's so many things that can be explored, and I am so excited. I wish I had taken notes on this book, so I don't know if I can talk about it, but I might just try to do a ramble or something. I don't know, because I love this book a lot. It's probably gonna be one of my favorites of the year. It exceeded the hype. Oh man, I have so many feelings. I'm very incoherent right now. This is what happens when I really like books. I just become incoherent and I can't talk about them. But I really loved it a lot. Cried a couple times. It's fine. Everything's fine. I gave this a definite 5 out of 5 stars. And that was it. That was all the books that I read in August. Let me know down below what your favorite book you read in August was, or what you were most excited to read in September. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll see you next time. Bye. Oh frick, I haven't thought of a kindness challenge. I'm not wearing pants. Not wearing pants.